You're listening to Schmidt Talks, the podcast wing of schmidttalks.com, with writer and blogger Heather Christena Schmidt. With a new episode each week, Schmidt talks about all the things you never knew you needed to hear about in these truly dystopian times. From politics and current events to life and living, Heather covers it all in this philosophical and introspective show. Come back every Monday for a new episode and get more info on Heather and her work at schmidttalks.com. And now for the show.
Welcome to Schmidt Talks, a weekly podcast about politics, life, and everything in between. My name is Heather Christena Schmidt. I am a mom, a writer, a blogger, and a critic of, just about everything. You can find more information on schmidttalks.com. There we can link up on social media. You can read some of my writing, and you can send me a message. On that note, a little housekeeping. This is the third episode of season 1, and I am very new to this podcasting thing. If you notice changes in the audio or the music, it's because I'm working out the kinks. And I am an open book when it comes to criticism and ideas, so please send them my way. Our first season is entitled Words Matter. I am a firm believer that the dystopia in which we live is a result of the loss of meaning within our words, or at least partially. This is to say that people have bended and twisted reality so much by manipulating words, by gaslighting people for what they say or did not say, and we're failing to respect the definitions of the words we use for what they are. If we are ever going to get out of this post-truth, kind of absurdist hellscape we all find ourselves in, we'll have to get back to some meaning to what we say, accepting others for what they mean. Admittedly, there will be some words that I think need their meanings to be articulated, expanded, and others, let's just get back to basics, Occam's razor and all that. Each week we will be evaluating a different word in that light in about 30 minutes or less. As many of you know, I like to keep things short and to the point. So with that said, our word this week, political. When I think about the word political or even the word politics, I don't think about the actual definition of the word. This is going to be one of those weeks where I think we need to talk about this in a broader context. We need to go beyond what Webster and Oxford or whatever dictionary tells us, because they say it's exclusive to the government or politics. And I think that the word political has such a bigger meaning than that. If you look at one of the many versions of it, it goes something like ever relating to a group or party within the government and political elections. But I don't think of any of that. I think of my mother-in-law. Years before the pandemic, before my husband's grandparents died, we would go over to my in-laws' house for dinner every Sunday. It was an Italian thing, I suppose. Spend time with the family, eat, share food and wine, all of that stuff. I'm sure many of you are familiar with doing stuff like this. Occasionally, my mother-in-law's friends and extended family would come over, show off the grandkids. The unfortunate situation for my mother-in-law has always been, though, that many of her friends and family are far more conservative than me or my husband or probably several of the family members are. The thing about it is that politics is usually shut down, at least the conversations about it. Some of them are against abortion. Many of them are quite vocal about that, actually. Some of them voted for Trump. And now years later, a lot of them have been unable to avoid my political views from running for city council. And guess what? We don't talk anymore. My mother-in-law, who is, I think, of when I hear the word political, it's because she refuses to allow people to enter into that realm at the family dinners, at the holiday parties. Why? Because it's when disagreements come up, where you find out that we don't really agree. And who has not had this experience where they're sitting at a table with a group of people and a conversation about guns comes up, or about immigration, or whatever thing that is going on that you're talking about that somehow sounds like it has to do with politics. And somebody inevitably says, "Oh, we don't talk political here." And this is my mother-in-law's problem and everyone's problem. It's a universal problem. That is to say that we're all a little or a lot political, and many of us are diametrically opposed, but we all end up trying to avoid it. So everybody says it, but it's disingenuous. People that say they aren't political are disingenuous, or they're being disingenuous. They don't understand what political is, or, and this is an insidious one, they don't want to take the responsibility that comes with being political. Even if taking a position of being apolitical is a political position in and of itself. No matter where people land on this, fundamentally, all people are political. And eventually, everyone finds out where we fall on that spectrum. But I'm getting lost here on the story. Let me back up. Years before the pandemic, as I said, before my husband's grandparents both died, we would go to my in-laws' house for dinner once a week. As I said, sometimes friends and family of my in-laws would come, and sometimes those friends and family would have varying political beliefs. Eventually they came out, and other ones would be very flagrant about it. One cousin would always wear a t-shirt that said, "Vets before refugees," and he proudly talked about flying the Confederate flag on his lawn. Another family member or friend, I think it was a friend, was in QAnon and would pull up secret codes. I'm talking about that conspiracy Q stuff that was on his laptop in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. Others would just get going on the topic of abortion or welfare. A lot of talk about welfare, something people on this general social status like to discuss because they loathe it so deeply. These are people that are both simultaneously privileged and unknowingly oppressed by capitalism, and they love to rail on about welfare ruining everything. And eventually, at some point, Reagan's welfare queen comes up. A racist, factually inaccurate trope in and of itself is the reason why everything sucks to these people that are political, but then they get to the point where, no, we don't talk about politics. We are apolitical. Eventually, at some point at one of these dinners, I responded with a story of my own about a run-in with one of these so-called Reagan welfare queens, and I will never forget the situation that I ran into, as well as describing it to this group of family and family friends. During my time working at a pharmacy as a pharmacy technician while I was working on my undergraduate, I was responsible for handling the Medi-Cal patients. For those of you unfamiliar, Medi-Cal is the California version of state Medicaid. It's for what people that are in poverty, that live below a certain income level, and that people that are on disability generally receive to supplement their health care and medication needs. While I was working at the pharmacy, my job was to get a lot of their, prior authorizations done, and to get their things like cancer medications, diabetes medications, seizure medications covered for them. None of my patients were driving Cadillacs and carrying Louis Vuitton bags. They were catching the bus to come to the pharmacy because they had no phone on which to call me. They were coming to find out if their cancer medication was covered, or if something that was desperately needed for them to continue to live was something that they would be able to finally get. So at one of these dinners, I am describing these people because I just could not take it anymore. We're sitting here and the Reagan welfare queen, again, this racist, disingenuous bullshit came up with a group of my mother-in-law's friends. And I still feel bad about it today because I ended up telling them the story about a 12-year-old patient that I had who was raped by her father. Her father was put in jail. She was impregnated with his baby. So this would be her brother or sister, her sibling. And after her father was put into jail, the state evaluated the situation, and her mother was not allowing to terminate the pregnancy. It was against their religion. So the state put her on Medi-Cal, and foster or social services was involved and all of that. But the bottom line was she was on Medi-Cal, and I was tasked with getting some of her pre-pregnancy medications covered, her vitamins and her anti-nausea pills and all of that. So as I'm sitting here at this dinner with my mother-in-law's friends, and they're talking about if only girls that are Reagan welfare queens would keep their legs closed, they wouldn't get pregnant, or they only get pregnant so that they can get state benefits to buy fancy cars and iPhones and all of that. And I told them the story about this girl, this 12-year-old patient who I still think about every single time people talk about how an abortion should be justified if a child is raped. Of course it should be. It should be justified irrespective of what the circumstances are. And I think of her and I wonder, what she's doing, or if she's even still alive, because that type of a tragedy is it's so profound. And to sit with people and have them describe it as a girl who can't keep her legs closed it's sickening. So I shared this story, and it became more and more uncomfortable, and you could see everybody at the table getting quite uncomfortable about it. It was so uncomfortable for them to sit in this truth, this reality that happened. That things grew immediately tense, and before anyone could question the veracity of the claim that the child had really been raped, which is what conservatives will often do, my poor mother-in-law, who I felt really bad for at that point, was so riddled with anxiety that she swooped in, topped off everyone's wine glasses, and reminded everyone, we don't talk politics here, just everyone let's have a good time. And that's what it always boils down to. We don't talk politics here, even if it's about a very real situation of a 12-year-old girl who was raped by her father and forced by her mother to have a baby in our own community. We don't talk politics here. And this position, this we don't talk politics here stance at the dinner parties and the barbecues and whatever, is exactly what I think of when people say the word political. I think of the people that won't have conversations. I think of the scenarios where something is held back for the sake of preserving a relationship. Because when people make the conscious decision to be apolitical, to not have these weird and uncomfortable and relationship destroying conversations, they're still taking a political position. That being that a lot of things and attitudes are permissible if it means we get to continue to have dinner and drinks together. It extends beyond the apolitical rules around holidays and parties, though. Politics is also in our daily life. When we go to say a job, name me a job that is not in some way political. Be it the way you're hired or fired, the way promotions happen, or even just the way you behave in the office. As a woman, myself, I can think of plenty of times that I'm being expected to police my tone, to consider my facial expressions. When I ran for city council, one of the most common comments made to me is that I should smile more. Politics is as much a part of our work and our professional life as it is our social life and our voting life, the government and political parties. Every time someone says, I can't say this, or there's no way I can say that, that person is making a political choice. And as I've highlighted, 9 times out of 10, it's actually making the choice to not do something, to not say something, to have an absence of a thing. To be honest, it's really difficult to think of anything that is not politicized in our lives today. Everything in society seems to come with a choice a choice about how you want to deal with it and what the consequences are. It's a political choice. And to be fair, there are a lot of scenarios in which it is appropriate to hold back. You can't, for example, just go out on the street and run around naked without first considering the potential consequences of doing so. There are plenty of circumstances in life where you have to make political choices for the benefit of everyone around you. Holding back your feelings, your thoughts, your comments, your facial expressions, your actions, that's politics in every arena. Just this week, I wrote a blog post about living with COVID, and while writing it, I came to the realization that public health is politics, and the way that COVID is being treated, it's political. People say, oh, the problem with our COVID response is that it was politicized. It was political all along. The decisions that we made from day one, whether or not to wear a mask, whether or not to shut down, whether or not to get vaccinated, today, whether or not kids should wear masks in school, whether or not people should get tested and quarantined, those are all yes or no decisions based upon political choices of everyday life. Think of it like this. Whether you talk about politics or not at Thanksgiving dinner, the issues that you're either dealing with or not dealing with, they still exist, irrespective of the conversation. You can, have Christmas morning with your family and talk about gun violence or don't talk about gun violence, but the gun violence is still there. Avoiding these conversations does not make them go away. Same goes for COVID or any public health challenge that affects other people in such profound ways. Whether or not we acknowledge it, COVID, like guns, abortion, immigration, and all of it, it's going to be there, whether we talk about it and whether we deal with it or not. Sometimes it shows up when you are getting on a flight and your flight is canceled. Talk about it or as a weather thing or a shortage of employees. It's really a political issue. COVID. Your kid falls off a bike and breaks his leg. You have to wait in the emergency room for 12 hours. You could argue about nursing shortage. You could argue about flu season, but it's really COVID. COVID and other public health policy decisions are having this much of a profound impact. And whether, we decide to talk about it or not talk about it, no politics at the dinner table, COVID in the viewfinder, it's still there. A lot of people call this shift in policy with COVID a paradigm shift in our culture as a whole. And I think this is where we recognize that health and public health and all of this stuff, it's all political because of the absence of discussion around it. From here on out, we won't be talking about things that are going on, like case numbers, case counts. We won't be talking about what you can do for others. We'll just tell you take your own personal responsibility. This isn't just an issue for public health, though. It's an issue for everything. Have you noticed in recent years that it's become ever more pervasive, though? This idea that if we don't talk about it, it's not happening. It doesn't need to be addressed. Pundits in both public health, public policy, politics alike, they're crying out at what's happening now. We are now just going to be people that don't talk about stuff. We have movies made about it. Don't look up. We just don't talk about it. This is all happening though. And whether we talk about it or not, and this problem of not talking about it, this apolitical attitude, this politicizing of everything by not talking about it, it started at the Thanksgiving table, it started at the summer barbecues, and it started at the Sunday dinners, where someone wanted to keep the peace and keep the drinks flowing so that, there were things that we just did not discuss. That was a political choice. And look at where it's gotten us. everything is politicized. There are just all these things, everything that at some point is hands off for the sake of keeping the peace. So when we talk about what it means to be political, what we really need to do is understand that it's more than just what Webster says. Being political is just being. It's existing and navigating life in this world where anything you say could carry consequences, life-altering changes, or an argument at the dinner table. You can't always predict it. Sometimes you can. Being political is sitting there and calculating, is what I'm about to say going to ruin this relationship or ruin the dinner or ruin the birthday? Being political is being in this crazy post-truth dystopian world where we can't have conversations, where we can't just say what we think and feel and hash things out and at the end of the day still be at the table. It is a conscious choice to use our words and our conversations in specific ways so as to maintain some illusion of, well, I'm not even sure what. When we accept that this is what really it means to be political, what we mean when we say political, that it is in everything and in every aspect of life, even choosing not to be. The question then becomes, is what's left worth it?
You've been listening to Schmidt Talks, the podcast wing of schmidttalks.com, with writer and blogger Heather Christena Schmidt. With a new episode each week, Schmidt talks about all the things you never knew you needed to hear about in these truly dystopian times. Thank you for listening, and make sure to come back every Monday for a new episode. You can get more info on Heather, her social media channels, and all of her work at schmidttalks.com. Stay safe.